Well, hey everybody, and welcome back to Cooking It Real. My name is Kathy, and today I'm going to take you on the journey of making a super easy sourdough starter from conception day to birthday. There are many ways to make a sourdough starter, and everyone has their favorite way, but this is so simple, so easy, anyone can do it. All you need is all-purpose flour and water and time. Make sure you stay tuned till the end so you can see how long it took me to grow this starter and what it looks like when it's ready. So let's get started. Okay, here we go. Step 1, get yourself a clean glass jar. This is a 1-quart mason jar. If you use a mason jar, I suggest you use one with a wide mouth lid, wide mouth. It'll be much easier to work with. Doesn't have to be a mason jar. It could be an old pickle jar that you've washed out, or peanut butter, or anything like that. This is a good size though. Quart is a good size. So let me show you how easy this is to get your starter started. Step 1, get your jar. Step 2, half cup of all-purpose flour. This is 1/4 cup, and quarter cups are much easier to work with putting things into a jar than a bigger cup, trust me. How do I know? My counter will tell you. And this is another 1/4 cup, so now we have half a cup of all-purpose flour in this jar. Now we add an equal amount, 1/2 cup of filtered water, tap water, bottled water. If your water is yucky, use bottled water. Stir this up. Make sure you get all in the corners. All right. And I could probably do a little better job mixing, but this will be good for right now. Then you want to cover your jar. I just use a little piece of paper towel. You could use a coffee filter. You could use a jar lid. Just don't put it on super tight and down while your starter is gestating. You will leave this on your counter in a warm but not hot place and leave it for today, day 1, tomorrow, day 2, and on day 3, we'll begin the process of feeding the starter and turning it into the sourdough starter that you want to have to make bread and muffins and all kinds of fabulous things. This is starting already. Look at this. I don't know if you can see it. Hang on. Can you see the bubbles? Does that get you excited? Woo! Come along on the journey. Let's learn as we go. I'm not a sourdough expert, but I have successfully maintained a sourdough for the past little over a year. So this is my second one, and we're going to do this one together. I will link in the description box below a video that I made prior to doing this new starter with my old starter about how I make sourdough loaf bread and sourdough raisin bread. And then coming soon after this video is released, I'm going to start doing videos on ways to use your sourdough starter and your sourdough discard. So make sure that you follow along as we go together. See you in 2 days. Now it's day 3, and it's time to start feeding our starter. The first thing you need to do is take the starter. You can see the hooch that's on the top. That's absolutely normal. Stir that in. What we're going to do is we're going to put half of what we have into discard. We're just going to eyeball it. That's about right. Doesn't have to be exact. And to this, we're going to add another 1/2 cup of flour and 1/2 cup of water. Stir that up. And we're going to leave that to sit like we did before, lightly covered. And we're going to feed it once every 12 hours. This discard, you want to totally discard. And by that, I mean throw it in the trash can. Do not put it down your sink because the flour and water will turn into paste and concrete if you're not careful. Cover this back up. And we'll see you in 12 hours. Okay, it's day 4 in the morning. See a couple of bubbles. I stirred down that hooch. You didn't see that. But there's a couple little bubbles. Now what we want to do is the same thing we did yesterday. We want to pour off half, about half. A little more, a little less. It's not going to matter too much. Okay. Discard that in the trash can. We're going to add half a cup of flour. Some for the jar, some for the counter. And half a cup of water. Mixy mix. There we go. Okay. Cover it back up. And we will see you later this evening. Okay, it's day 4 evening, and I'm really starting to see some action in this jar. I'm going to stir in my hooch. If this is your first time making sourdough and it's day 4 of your sourdough and you're not seeing that kind of action, don't worry. It's completely, absolutely normal. It can take up to 7 to 10 days to see any kind of action. In fact, I've recently learned that if you have made sourdough in your kitchen prior to this new batch, or if you make it regularly and you're making a new batch, you will have more of the wild yeasties. Look at this. I'm going to do this every time. Luckily, it's not precise. You're going to have more of the wild yeasties working for you than someone who has never made sourdough in their kitchen. And I know that yeasties are amazing critters because my husband and I own a craft brewery, and he is the head brewer, and yeast is a very important part of what we make at the brewery every day. And the yeast, actually, as my husband says, they work for free. They just need a little bit of something to eat, and they're just happy to do all the work. So now we got this guy stirred up for another night, and we'll give him a cover, and we'll see you in the morning. It's the morning of day 7, and today I think things are looking pretty good. I also think today's the day that I'm going to pour off the hooch rather than stirring it in. So we got an awful lot today. I think I might even put it in a new jar. All right, let's pour off that hooch. Now that hooch can go down your sink, no problem. Right, I'm gonna just transfer it to a new jar. You don't have to do this, but I'm just gonna do it for fun. Let's see what we got for consistency. Well, first I'm gonna pour off half. Stir it down a little bit. See how nice and thick it is today? That's good. I think that's about half. Okay, now into your new home. All nice and purty. There you go. Now remember, what's left in this jar does not go down the sink. Right, now, if you think your starter is not as thick as this one, you might consider just adding a little bit of extra flour rather than the usual half cup, which we're putting in now. Half cup of flour, half cup of water. Stir, stir, stir. If your starter feels thin or soupy, not to panic, not to worry, especially if it's your very, very first starter ever in your home. Just add at this point, like for today, add an extra 2 tablespoons to a 1/4 cup extra flour, and it'll be a little more thick. Let me demonstrate that. Hang on. Let's see. This is a half cup measure, so I'm just going to add this much more. It's about a 1/4 cup. Like I said before, a little bit more, a little bit less is not going to make a huge difference. It might even jumpstart your starter. Or you could try using a different kind of flour. You could use bread flour, whole wheat flour, rye flour. But this, I'm just using regular all-purpose flour because that's what most people have. There you go. All right. So that's all stirred up. We're going to get a new towel and put this sweet baby away till this evening. There you go. Brand new jar. Don't you feel better? Yes, you do. All right, we'll see you later. Okay, everybody, it's day 8, and I am calling it the final day. Here's my starter. Have a good close-up. See the hooch on top? I'm going to pour that off one last time. There we go. And now I'm gonna pour off half my starter. Let's get a look at those bubbles first. And I don't know, can you see them on the side? Let's see. It's hard to see. Look at that. Ooh, yeah, baby. Now, this is legitimate sourdough discard. Okay, you see, you can see the tiny bubbles in there. It's still a little bit loose. It hasn't eaten for 12 hours. But you could probably, this is probably good enough for you to use in a discard recipe. And I'm going to be posting some of that coming up soon. Let's feed this final starter one more time. Get my half a cup of flour. Get it all over the counter, I'm sure. Yep, here we go. Half a cup of flour. And let me get the water. Half a cup of water. Stir, stir, stir. Now you want this starter to rest and get active and start eating up that flour for probably, I'd say 4 or 5 hours maybe. And then you can start using it to bake with. Okay, I'm declaring this officially starter. Ta-da! Happy birthday, starter. So your new baby has been born. Finally, what should you do now? You just fed this the one last time, and in a few hours, you'll see it rise. You can use it in a recipe. I'll put a link in the description box below of a video I made recently where I showed you how I make my sourdough bread. Look at this. Isn't that beautiful? I make mine in a bread pan. Oh, it smells so good. So let's talk about what we've learned in this past 8 days. It's not anything terrifying to make a sourdough starter. In fact, it's pretty easy. It just takes consistency. You have to start it, then you have to feed it twice a day. If you made your sourdough starter when you got home from work, say it was 6 o'clock, 6 p.m., if you don't get up at 6 a.m., then you might want to pick a good 12-hour window when you can start to feed your starter, the morning feeding and the evening feeding. If you're a night owl and you started your starter at midnight, you don't have to feed it till noon the next day. If you sleep in till, I don't know, 2 o'clock or something crazy, you might want to readjust when you start your starter. You don't have to like set a timer, so long as you are in the ballpark, it's going to work for you. If you're following along and you're on day 4 or day 5 or even day 7 or even day 8 and you don't see a whole lot of action with your starter, here's some of the reasons that may be. 1, maybe it's not warm enough where you're keeping your starter. You want it to be like, so if you don't have that kind of temperature throughout, you're going to have to find a little spot where you can put your starter. One thing you don't want to do is you don't want to heat it up, okay? You don't want to put it near a heat source like on a burner or anything like that. You don't want to put it in your oven. You don't want to even put it on a sunny windowsill because that is too much and it can really start to get big. I'm sure you've seen all the pictures of a sourdough that has just bubbled up over the top and it's made a huge mess. Well, we don't want that, but you do need to keep it somewhere warm. What I did was I put mine under my kitchen cabinet, which has a light underneath it, and I left that light on. And it's not warm, it's not hot. I mean, it's warm, but it's not hot. It's not cold. It's an incandescent bulb. So it gives off just a little bit of heat. Like if you have a lamp or something like that, you can just put your starter right near your lamp. And that might be just enough heat that it needs. Now that's if you're not getting any action. If everything's bubbling away great, then great. You've done perfectly. Another thing that we learned about was hooch. Okay, now hooch is the liquid that forms on the top of the starter, and there'll be, as time goes on, there'll be a bigger and bigger layer of hooch. You can stir that in or you can pour that off. Either way is okay. If you stir it in, you will have a bit stronger of a sourdough flavor. But if you pour it off, you're still going to have that sourdough flavor. It just won't be as intense. Another thing that we learned about was the discard. It is incredibly important that while you are building your sourdough from conception to birth, which today is the birthday, that every time you feed, you want to pour off half the sourdough, at least half the sourdough. And that will be your sourdough discard. If you didn't, you would have to feed so much more flour and water, and pretty soon you would have something that would be needing a bigger and bigger container all the time, and it would just be too much. Okay, my recipe for 2 loaves, just like this, is 150 to 250 grams of starter. Now, how much is that in volume? That would be about half of this. Maybe it's about a cup. I measure it on a scale. And the reason you measure on a scale, that's another important thing to know, is because the flour that you use, the day that you're baking, the temperature and humidity in your kitchen, all these things have an effect on your flour. And it will take up water differently for all these different scenarios. So you definitely want to have your ratio in mind, okay? And follow that video, watch that video that I filmed a while back, and I'll link it, like I said. And you want to have that ratio in mind, and then you will have the exact right amount of flour for that day, and then the same amount of water. If your starter is not showing much signs of life, the first thing you should do, feed more frequently. Instead of every 12 hours, every 8 hours. Do that for a couple of days. If that doesn't help, try every 6 hours. Now, that could get a little bit painful. You don't want to have to wake up in the middle of the night to feed your starter, and you could probably let that feeding go. If this is your very first starter in your life or in your kitchen, your today's kitchen, you might not have as much wild yeast floating around as I do in my kitchen, because I've had this starter for like well over a year. There's no need to worry about the yeast floating around in your kitchen. It's not a bad thing, okay? It's everywhere. It's in the wild, it's outside, it's inside, it's all over the place, and it's completely natural. So you've started feeding just a little bit more frequently, and you're still not thinking this looks like Kathy's starter. Well, all starters are a little bit different, but after trying to feed more frequently, you might try to feed just a little bit more flour. Instead of a half a cup of flour and a half a cup of water, you might try half a cup of flour and a third a cup of water. So the ratio to flour and water, flour is a little bit higher. But it's still important to discard half every time you feed as you're building your starter. Okay? Now, once your starter is built, you don't have to discard if you don't want to. If you have this much starter, and this is like, let's see, I'd say maybe 2 cups by now, you can definitely bake it, bake 2 loaves of bread and some muffins and some cakes, and bake it away. Leave yourself at least about a quarter of a cup of starter, all right? And then you can start building it all over again. After this rises some, you can pour off half of it. That's your discard. And then just work with the other half. But always leave yourself a little bit in the bottom so that you can keep that starter growing. I forgot to say one thing. If you are finished baking with your sourdough, you feed it again, put a lid on it, put it in the refrigerator, okay? And then you can take it out whenever you want to bake again, feed it, and keep on going. I hope that you've learned a little bit more about sourdough starters and that you're encouraged to start your own. I hope that you do. If you do, please leave a comment in the description box below and I will cheer you on. If you have any questions, perhaps I can answer them. Leave a comment down below. Also, don't forget, If you learned anything, give it a good like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. If you turn on the little notification bell, you won't miss any of my content. I will see y'all next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye. Keep on going.